All right, I'll call him and see if he has, like a little lost sheep, but like a black sheep, lost his way.
Hello?
Okay, I got it on. I got the.
Okay, I'm on my laptop. I'm trying to see how I get on.
Okay. I sent you an email to the link as well. Okay, I'll hang up now. Are you guys in for a treat? Ooh, yeah. Mike Morales, hello. How are you? Grace to you. Oh, yeah, let me copy this link. If you want to come on in, Mike Morales, and tell me what for. I can handle it, I think. Oh, there's Tony. Copy this.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, no.
What?
No, you look just as handsome as you did yesterday.
Lord have mercy. Hi, Dale. There's a link, Dale.
Dale is here.
All right, so we're here for a very special reason because yesterday we had a little dust up with the free will preacher, with one of the kings of the James gang. He was here bellowing out the regular Christian tripe of, that man has his own free will and man can make a choice, and oh my God, he better make a choice because the eternal destiny of humanity is at stake here. And let's not blame God for man's eternal destiny, and let's not praise God for man's eternal destiny. And let's not see that man's destiny is wrapped up in the purpose of God. No. Let's not see that. Let's see that there's some wild other purpose going on. In other words, God is out of control. He's trying to work on plan B as hard as he can because he was totally surprised at what Adam did in the garden. It just came out of nowhere. Oh my goodness. Anyway, so here's the deal. Tony and I were just talking. I'll shut up in just a minute. So Tony and I were just talking, and I was saying, wait a minute now. This guy, Mr. AK, was arguing, hinting, I mean, he really couldn't pin him on it, but he was hinting that grace, God's grace, can be refused. That you can refuse God's grace. And I said to Tony, wait a minute now. Grace is one of the operations of God. Grace is how God operates with at least some of us at the moment, right? It's an operation of God. And if you can refuse God's operation, see, the free will preachers, they believe God grace is an offer, but we have shucked that idea out of our head, and now we understand that grace is not an offer; it's God's operation. It's how God operates. So I was telling Tony that if you can refuse God's operation of grace, does that also mean you can refuse God's operation of judgment? Because both are how God operates with humanity at different times. Sometimes he's gracious to us, and then at other times God operates in judgment. And so both are operations of God. And I think that it's just fantastic to see that grace cannot be refused because it has nothing to do with us. It's the favor of God shown to those who don't even deserve it. Anyway, it's your turn, Tony.
Yeah. What about Paul on the road to Damascus? Did he fight the very one who died for him? No, immediately Paul says, "What is it, Lord? Lord." He didn't say, "What is it, you um, terrible anti Pharisee? You're not a Pharisee. Why do I have to listen to you? Or you're not a Sadducee? Or what about uh, the great white throne judgment? When they're brought before the throne, are they going to say, 'Hell no, we won't go to the lake of fire'?"
Mm-hmm.
That was a popular saying in the early 70s about the Vietnam War. Hell no, we won't go. And you know what? A lot of them didn't. But anyway, here we're dealing with the one who's going to make them go. But it's going to be for their good.
Right.
He's not going to torture them in fire. He's going to inter them back into an unconscious state. And the very split second they go into that unconscious state, to them is the very split second they come back alive and God is all in all.
Mm-hmm. So what you're saying is
So,
there's no consciousness in death, and so at the moment of their resurrection, it's just like waking up. You don't even know how long you were asleep.
right. It's just like us. We go to sleep. I go to sleep around 9:30. Bam! I'm awake and I think, gosh, I slept that long?
Mm-hmm.
It was just like I just went to sleep.
So sleep is a
But
perfect
anyway,
metaphor. Sleep is a perfect metaphor for us all. It's like God giving us, how in literature and in movies and storytelling, they have this foreshadowing going on. You see some little event at the beginning of the story of the movie, of the novel, that kind of becomes full blown later on. I think that going to sleep each night is a foreshadowing that God graciously gives us to show us this is a taste of what the resurrection will be. You go to sleep, you wake
right,
up, oh my God, you feel so refreshed.
the sleep of death.
Right.
It's
Anyway,
like,
so let's hammer out this idea that grace cannot be refused, just like God's judgment cannot be refused, because they are both operations of God.
what did Paul tell Timothy? On his road to Damascus, yet the grace of God overwhelms.
Oh man.
It overwhelmed him. Bam! Just like a big time wrestler. Bam! Overwhelmed him.
Wow. That's right. That's what
The
he said in
grace of
First
God
Timothy.
overwhelmed in faith and love. It overwhelmed. Now, Paul did, I can't remember where this is, but Paul did say that he was preaching that those who are chosen or called may be happening upon Life Ionian. It's almost like they're just walking along, and all of a sudden, bam! Hey, I just happened upon Life Ionian. What do you think? Oh, hang on. Somebody's at the door.
Oh, I had my mic off. That's why I wasn't saying something. Okay, some of us are more cooperative with the grace of God than others. Paul was the most resistant to the grace of God. And so, therefore, of course, he would, when he's telling the story, that the grace of God overwhelmed him. Now, it didn't have to overwhelm me. I was kind of favorable to it already. when I was 14 years old and came into the way. But Paul was he was a prick. He was out there beating up the saints of God, making sure they went to jail, endorsing the assassination of Stephen. So, of course, God had to just really overwhelm him, blinded him, knocked him on his butt. They led him around for 3 days by the hand because he was blind. He fasted. It was just a big event. And he didn't even say the sinner's prayer. He just said, "Oh my God, who art thou, Lord?"
Linwood, I can't see you.
Yeah, I turned my camera off so that there'd be more memory for our show, so that there wouldn't be a feedback.
Okay.
There wouldn't be a feedback.
Yeah, no. Didn't Paul choose to let Gracie? Didn't Paul choose to let Christ knock him off his horse, though?
Oh, brother. Say it again. I'd love to hear it.
Didn't Paul choose to let Christ knock him off his horse?
Yeah. I think we get the picture.
Paul, I am a gentleman. I cannot knock you off your horse unless you allow me. Yes, Lord, please.
I one time did a little show or wrote an essay, I forgot which, maybe both, on how that free will is basically gaslighting. Don't believe your lying eyes. Believe what I tell you. Paul graciously allowed his free will to allow God to knock him off the horse. That is really funny.
Now, when I was searching myself how to get saved, these are quotation marks. Can you see those air marks?
Yeah.
They're air quote. When I was back in '73, I was seeking how to be saved because my brother Tim, my twin brother, was preaching at me, and I'd curse him up one side, down the other.
Uh-huh.
And but he started getting to me. I thought, well, how do you really get saved? And I started Genesis, and I worked my way to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and Acts, and I thought, well, this doesn't sound right. And then I got to Paul. I got to Romans. I thought, wow, this makes sense. So I started writing down certain verses in Romans, like Romans 4:23 to 5:1, 1 Corinthians actually 15:1 through 4, things like that. And I take them up on this hill behind my mom and dad's house. And I would quote these verses to God. As a good Catholic, I'd kneel down in the sand because it was a sandy hill. I say, okay, God, I believe this and this and this. Nothing would happen because I really thought it was going to be like a Pauline experience where there'd be a fiery chariot come down and welcome home, son, So I said, okay, God, I'll be back tomorrow. So the next evening, I went back with more verses. And the third night, I went back with more verses. And I said, okay, God, I believe this and this and this and that. Nothing happened. See, I was expecting something external to happen. And I stood up, brushed the sand off my knees, and I looked up into the stars, and I pointed my finger at those stars. I said, God, you said if I would just believe, I'd be saved. And all of a sudden, God just opened my eyes, and he said, you do believe? And I thought, yeah, I do believe. I do believe. And you can't believe unless you're saved. Believing is a proof of your salvation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are fighting the evangel, it's a proof of your destruction or being from hollows. Um, but if you are believing, it's a proof of your salvation. And I stood up and I said, I do believe. I really do believe, God, that Christ really did die for my sins and
Mm-hmm.
that he was tombed and roused the third day. Therefore, I am saved. And I went hop, skipping, jumping down the hill, laughing. It's that simple. It's that simple.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the wise, the theologians say, well, you have to have a transaction. You have to have a transactional thing with God. God tells you have to be baptized, you have to repent, you have to join a church, you have to believe in the Trinity, you have to believe in this and that. By the time they're done with you, it's such a mind screw, you don't know what to believe. But it's so simple. See, it's not you must believe to be saved. It's you will believe because you are chosen.
You must believe, for it is true, not to make it true. It already is true.
That's right. You will believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. In Romans, Paul gave an excellent example of Abraham. Abraham said, I'm going to make you a father of many nations. And Abraham had no reason to doubt God. See, God had never lied to Abraham. And Abraham said, you know what? I'm 100 years old. Sarah's reproductive system died a long time ago. But I believe you, God. I believe you can pull this off. I don't know how. You aren't requiring me to go to college, to go to medical school to figure it out. And you aren't requiring anybody to go to theological school to figure it out. All you do is you just want us to believe you. You're believable.
Oh, yeah.
And how can we believe that a guy 2,000 years ago dying on a cross saves us? We're
Wow.
not asked to believe now. God just says it. Okay, God, I believe you. You're believable. You've never lied to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm gonna believe you, and that's what happened to me. I said, okay, God, you're believable. I'm just gonna believe you, and God took off the blinders, just like the woman, the seller of purple, Lydia. It said God opened her heart to believe Paul. God opened her heart to believe. And God had to open my heart. For 3 days and 3 nights, just as Christ was in the grave, I was in the grave of unbelief.
Mm-hmm.
And on the third night, God raised me from the dead and said, look, here it is. And my eyes were open.
Wow. This is what was exciting about Antioch, I believe, as opposed to the waning signs and miracles over in Jerusalem. This is why boys and girls came to Antioch and spent a year there, just learning and experiencing and sharing this kind of stuff. I don't see any difference between this miracle and the miracle of raising the dead or healing the lame, making them walk. The fact that we believe is a miracle. The fact
Exactly.
that we believe because we are so-called intellectuals. We fancy that we're smarter than the average bear. Even in 1 Corinthians 15, 1 through 4, before it says Christ was crucified, died for our sins, entombed, and roused the third day, even before that it says, here is what I accepted. If you can see this word accepted, here's what I accepted. I, Paul, the most self-righteous a-hole of the first century, I, Paul, a Pharisee of the Pharisee, I know the Old Testament more than anybody else. I know it all. And here's what I accepted, that Christ died for our sins. I've accepted it. Okay. It was presented to me. Oh, here's finally what I accepted. And he couldn't add anything
and it's
to
like
it.
the rain. It's like the grass accepting the rain. It's a neutral acceptance. You're just there. The rain falls. Wow, I'm getting wet. And Paul was just there on the road to Damascus. Wow. Uh, his grace and love and faith is raining down on me, and I'm accepting it like the grass accepts the rain. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a free will acceptance. If 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 Paul went according to his will, he never would have accepted.
Right, right. Because his will definitely was to beat up some Christians.
Yeah, right.
Let's make them pay. Teach them a lesson they'll never forget.
Yeah. Well, you got to think about it. Paul thought that these Jews, by them breaking the law, God was going to curse Israel again. And it was going to be worse. So he had to try to nip this in the bud. And so he felt like he had to save Israel from destruction. But yet 70 AD came anyway, didn't it? Christ prophesied the destruction.
All right, now I am not so gracious with Paul on that matter. I think that if I try to analyze his motivations, to me it seems like the new believers who were coming along, the disciples of Christ, were kind of ruining the cash flow of the Pharisees and the rulers of Israel. But you're saying that his heart was more pure or gentle. He was actually trying to save Israel from trouble. I'll defer to you. That sounds as logical as my own argument. But to jail the Christians and to kill Stephen, yeah, man, it's a nasty situation. Who knows what was going on and what motivated Saul and the Pharisees to do what they did.
Well, Paul knew all about the curses of the law, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
And he knew what was coming down the pike.
Mm-hmm.
If Israel quit the law, well, what came down the pike happened. Jerusalem was destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
The temple destroyed. And it wasn't... well, they did say, your blood be upon us and on our children. So the guilt did come upon them and their children. Do you think that that's why Jerusalem was destroyed?
I don't know. It
But
there
anyway,
there is
we're
there is
going far
prophecy about
afield
the
from,
destruction of Israel, right, from the Old Testament.
yeah, but see, we're going far afield from the main topic of grace.
Right, and that grace is one of God's
Um,
operations.
yeah, we are in the administration of grace, and grace is being dispensed. So you could say dispensation of grace,
Mm-hmm.
because God is dispensing grace. Um, so, yeah, could Israel refuse what was coming down the pike in 70 AD? That was the antithesis of grace.
That was God's operation of judgment.
Yeah.
And how could they refuse that judgment?
But yet, we're in the administration of the secret of the conciliation,
Mm-hmm.
all that God was in Christ conciliating the world to himself, not reckoning their offenses, and yet he destroyed Jerusalem. And yet he killed 6 million Jews through Hitler. Now, I shouldn't say he killed personally, but you have to admit the buck stops with him. It's
Mm-hmm.
his world, it's his creation. And yet he's going to judge Hitler for their evil heart and what they did. But judging is a setting right. He's going to say, Hitler, you meant this for evil, but God meant it for good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think Hitler's going to be set right and think, wow, you mean my acts, my life is justified? And God is going to say, you could not have done otherwise. You did not have free will to be gracious to the Jews. I made Satan enter your heart to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Judas. What Judas did was justifiable because what he did became his very salvation
Right.
and your salvation and
Thank God for
mine.
Judas.
Yeah. And thank God for Adam disobeying,
Oh
because
yeah.
his act became our salvation.
He did it absolutely in ignorance. When Peter was talking to the Pharisees in the beginnings of Acts, and they made him give an account of what the heck was going on with this new movement. Peter said, "You crucified the Lord in ignorance." Well, surely we could say that about Adam, that he ate of the fruit in a great degree of ignorance. He didn't know what he was doing. He went along with the snake and
Had
his
they
wife.
known,
Had they known, yeah.
yes, they would not have crucified him.
That's right. Had they known, they would have not agreed. How weird.
God hid it from them.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember Christ kept saying, don't tell anybody I said this. Don't tell anybody about this. Don't tell anybody about the mountain of transfiguration. Don't tell anybody about this and that. Mum's the word, because I have to be crucified. What? You're going to be crucified? Don't tell anybody. He couldn't even trust the disciples to not blab what was going to come out of his death, burial, and resurrection. God hides these things from the wise and prudent. So
Wow.
where's your free will, big boy? Where's your free will?
This is God's operation all the way. When you put it in that
It's
frame,
just kind of like, yeah. God was a CIA operative way back then, doing one thing, hiding it from the people so that another thing would happen.
wow.
Even our CIA today does that.
Uh-huh.
We keep things quiet in one country, we sucker them into doing this. Like, who was the leader of Iraq? Saddam Hussein.
Right.
Our ambassador, um, I saw a video telling Saddam Hussein, yeah, you can go into Kuwait. We don't care. We suckered him into Kuwait, and then George Bush Sr. rushed everybody over there and kicked him out of Kuwait. You know, and it's just like Joseph and his brothers.
Mm-hmm.
You know? But in Joseph's case, he told them they were all going to bow down to him.
Uh-huh.
But he did tell them, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good.
Mm-hmm.
You
So
know?
so who gets the final
And
say?
what do you mean?
Did Joseph's brothers get the final say, or did God get the final say? Because they meant it for evil,
Oh,
but
God,
God meant it for good.
definitely God.
Mm-hmm.
Christ is going to tell his brothers that put him to death, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good.
Oh man, this stuff is looking more
And they thought
beautiful.
that they were using their free will. And yet, the chief priest said, there must be someone die. There must be. And what did Peter say about Judas? He must fulfill what was written concerning him. He didn't have a free will in it.
Wow, say that again. That's great. Judas must fulfill.
Um, yeah, Peter told the Jews before they picked Matthias that Judas must fulfill the scriptures concerning him. And then they chose Matthias.
Uh-huh.
Well, uh, Judas didn't have a free will. Even Jesus commanded him, do what you must do quickly. Hurry. You think Judas could uh, not do what he was told to do by the master?
Mm-hmm. I tell you, Tony, every second it's looking better and better. Almost like we can trust God. We can trust him
Yeah.
to pull it off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wouldn't want that to happen now. We don't want to trust God about this matter. We got to figure it out on our own. We got to save our own self, and we got bootstraps. Let's pull up our bootstraps, and we'll lift ourselves off of the planet.
Let's indebt God.
That's exactly what free will teaches, doesn't it? That if you
Yeah.
use your free will, God is obligated to save you because you did the
It's
right thing.
the churches are a seller of fire insurance.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want to burn in hell for eternity, you've got to pay for this. You've got to do what we tell you to do. It's a form of fire insurance, is all it is.
It's a cash flow system, and they get the cash.
Yeah.
We get the flow.
Well, they are corporations. Non-profit corporations, but they are corporations, and they are a business. A 501c3 organization are businesses,
Mm-hmm.
but nonetheless, we shouldn't say it's all bad. It's not all bad. God is being glorified, Christ is being glorified, one way or the other. I mean, would you rather all the churches in the U.S. be burned down and every Christian in prison and killed because they preach a works-based religion? I mean, they do other things too. They worship God, they worship Christ. It's not all bad.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah.
Okay, let's pop this thing in and see if anybody wants to join us. So,
I have about I have about 10 more minutes.
okay, I'll watch the clock.
I
God's
have to get back to
operation,
work.
God's operations of grace, but no offers of grace. That's what the deal is. Sometimes God operates in a gracious kind of way with his creatures, with his creation. Sometimes he operates in a judgmental kind of way. Either way, it's God's operation, and it's not to be refused. It can't be refused. You can't refuse his grace, and you can't refuse his judgment. So there.
Right. Those who are set for Ionian life believe.
That's verse 48 of what? Chapter 10?
13.
13? Acts chapter 13, verse 48. Those who are set for Aeonian life do believe. And if they are not set for Aeonian life, they cannot believe. Elsewhere in 2 Thessalonians, Paul says, not for all is the faith. Not for all is the faith. It's important for the moment to have some vessels of honor and some vessels for dishonor. We've got to have the Judas. We've got to have Joseph's brothers. We've got to have the Pharisees making a mess of things. We've got to have Saul before we can have Paul. Because the whole story is very much like when Moses went to the Pharaoh and said, let my people go. And he said, okay, go ahead. And then God hardened his heart. And then a big disaster happened, and God went back to Moses and said, let my people go. And he says, okay. And then God hardened his heart and gave him another big fat disaster. He hardened his heart 9 times and gave him 9 disasters, or was it 10 disasters? Including the death of the firstborn of all of Egypt. So,
And the firstborn ransomed Israel out of Egypt. It wasn't until the ransom was made that they were freed.
wow.
And it's not until Christ became the ransom for all that the whole universe is freed from corruption,
Wow.
slavery to corruption.
Mm-hmm. So not
It's
only
not
is
a free will. They had to be pushed out of Egypt. They had to leave once the ransom was made. They had to be freed.
mm-hmm.
They couldn't choose to stay behind. They had to leave.
And what did they do once they left? They started complaining. And they wanted to go back.
Yeah.
Aren't we a mess?
Well, they were baptized into Moses, and I think that's one of the problems they had.
Oh?
Because Moses sinned, and where he goes, they go, so to speak. Since they were baptized into him,
Mm-hmm.
he never made it into the promised land, and those baptized into him didn't either. But we're baptized into Christ's death. So where Christ goes, we go.
Uh-huh.
That's why we will be seated with Christ among the celestials.
So when we say that Moses was a type of Christ, in this situation, we can also say the firstborn of Israel were a type of Christ. And all of,
You mean firstborn of Egypt?
I meant the firstborn of Egypt. Yeah, they were a type of Christ.
Right. Absolutely.
And they weren't even knowingly picturing the great Son of God on the cross of Christ. They didn't know that they were being a type of Christ.
And firstborn doesn't always mean a little baby. A lot of the firstborn of Egypt were 50, 60, 80 years old.
Oh, are you saying that 50, 60, 80-year-old guys were killed on that night?
Oh, yeah. They were
Well,
the firstborn.
that throws an entirely different light on this thing, because the typical way to view it is that all these little babies were killed.
Right.
And it wasn't the little babies. It was the most important son who had the most important function in the family as the firstborn. They were killed. Holy smoke.
Right. Yeah. Well, Christ was the firstborn in his family. He was in his 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. The firstborn were not Israelites. And if you really think about it, Christ wasn't, he was kind of part Israelite through his mother, but yet, you know, I hate to say it, but his father wasn't an Israelite.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
The great God of the universe was not an Israelite. That's good.
Yeah. Jesus came in his Jew suit, but he was only part Israelite, if you want to call him that.
Well, everyone knows the difference between a Jew and an Israelite. An Israelite has 1/3 less calories.
Oh, I just got that.
And you're the king of
Oh,
puns. You're the king of puns.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to go. I'm going to have to end on that highlight.
That's funny. I told you, king of puns.
Yeah.
Okay, I got to get out of here too. And
All right.
thanks everyone for joining us. If you missed part of the show, go back and watch it over, because we covered some good stuff. We're arguing that you cannot refuse God's grace, because God's grace is an operation. It's not an offer. Just like you can't refuse God's judgment, because you have nothing to do with it except to stand there and be judged. Okay. Bye for now. Oh, Andy. Let me let you in. Now you can talk, Andy.
How you doing? You okay?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine.
Jolly good. Well done.
Okay, I really have to go. So,
right. Okay.
grace to you.
I'm just out for a walk with my my dog at the moment.
Okay.
You
Rhonda.
okay, are you today? You all right
Dale.
today?
St. Tommy. Mike.
Right.
Thanks for joining us. Got to go. Hi, baby.
quick.